We hear a lot of perspectives on the Mankind podcast. Inclusion of a guest is not an endorsement of their views, and the opinions expressed here do not always represent the mission or values of the Mankind Project USA.
Hi, this is Alex from the Future Is Humane Project, and you're listening to the Mankind podcast. You cannot lump it all together and just say manhood is a bad thing, masculinity is a bad thing, toxic, everyone has to change this and change that. It's not productive. What is productive is to see the two things as separate, to see the structural problem as what it is, and then come together on the emotional stuff, come together on communication, get the communication working so conversations can be had in a positive way to deal with the structure, so that we're not, because I think it's very true, you know, if people are finger wagging and saying men should be doing this, and why don't they sort themselves out, and why are they doing, then you get a defensive attitude, and so men feel persecuted.
Looks like the rain has gone.
G'day and welcome to another episode of the Mankind Podcast, the show where we break the molds of modern manhood to prove that there is more than just one way to be a man. I'm your host, Brandon Clift, and today's episode is all about understanding the roles of conversations in helping us avoid conflict. And we do that with director, documentarian, filmmaker, Alex Gabbay. Now, Alex joins us today to talk about his latest film in his 4-part series of the Future Is Humane Project, which is called Beyond Men And Masculinity, a film that takes a look at and explores the harmful expectations of masculinity and the effects that it has on male behavior. It's a kind of film that is going to show you discussions on shame, anger, the transmission of dominance and power and what that looks like as a man, as well as creates a dialogue around those same topics: power, relationships, diversity, and gender expression. Now, here's the thing though, here's the challenge that I think a film like this does very well in tackling, is the difference between conflict around an issue and a conversation. You see, it's my judgment that the operating system these days, and believe it or not, look back at all of human history, it seems to be the most common operating system, is that when you and I have a disagreement around a topic, an issue, a situation, that the default is to get into conflict. And what I love about this film, having gotten an early access screening of it, is the fact that it opens up and invites us, the viewer, into a conversation around men, masculinity, manhood, and how we can approach this hotbed of conversation that is happening around the world today. So whether you're a man or a woman or gender fluid, non-binary, whether you're a liberal, a Republican, a libertarian, whether you're Christian, Jewish, atheist, black, white, wherever you are, whichever kind of human being you are, I believe you're going to really enjoy today's in-depth conversation with Alex Gabbay as we dive into how we as human beings first, can approach the difficult conversations around men and masculinity. Enjoy. So, mate, please take a moment to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about this film, and we'll get underway.
Okay, well, it's nice to be here, Brandon. So my name's Alex, as you just said, and I'm the director of the film. The film is part of a project called The Future Is Humane, and this is the latest documentary we've released. So the film is called Beyond Men And Masculinity, and as it was actually made during lockdown. The film is a sort of intimate portrait of the sort of changing landscape that we face as men. It covers several continents, including America, quite a lot in America. And in a way, it doesn't offer necessarily solutions. But what it does do is give you a portrait of different men, different scenarios, different ways of looking at manhood across various continents. And it raises questions, and that's important for discussions.
Mm. I like that. So to me, it sounds like more of a conduit to conversation than it is a lot of films and documentaries that are made almost act as a very biased, dare I say, biased approach to being very absolute, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of films try and say, this is the way things are. There is no gray area. It's black and white. And having had a chance to see the film, you're able to grant me some early access. I'm grateful for that. I can definitely agree. It does just open a lot of conversation, a lot of questions, and hopefully it takes us away from the conflict that's happening right now, especially around conversations around masculinity and manhood.
Yeah.
Because conflict seems to be the current operating system when it comes to discussing a lot of things these days. So give us a bit of a breakdown of the title. I mean, Beyond Men and Masculinity. How do we go beyond it? Is it an approach just to understanding it better, or?
I think the idea is that it is a border. It's a square that it's sometimes referred to as the man box.
Yes.
And so, it's the idea is beyond these borders. And of course, the borders that we have as men, women also have borders because they come up against our borders and so on and so on. And these borders are completely arbitrary. They're cultural. And so the idea is what we can change, we should change. What we can, how we can cross borders or go beyond our borders, go beyond the limitations that we have. So the film is sort of saying, it's not just saying, let's redefine masculinity into another box. It's saying, let us expand the box. Let us actually throw away the edges and you're free. You're free to be yourself. And the idea of growth of the individual to be who they want to be. So in a way, it's without definition. And that's why the film covers so many different aspects, because it just, I don't think one size fits all solution works for masculinity, because we're all complex people. We all have, personal journeys, personal traumas, personal buttons that get pushed. And so in a way, you have to deal with that personally. So it's not a one size fit. Also, the film kind of allows for many aspects of masculinity.
Well, I mean, you've got 13 chapters in there that cover, a good amount of breadth around the conversation. So it's a great representation of a lot of the different conversations that are being had. I'm curious though, what is it in the climate of the world today that motivated you to take on a project like this, to reach out to the experts that you did and ask the questions that you have? What was the motivation?
I think, funny enough, it's what you said. It's like the world is so conflictual. So you can be, talking about the same thing with someone, having exactly the same intention. I mean, as in to solve something or to give your viewpoint, and somehow it ends in conflict. So for me, the idea was how to kind of create conversations that can lead us, how to create a conversation that can lead us towards a better understanding of what manhood could be. And so I think one of the reasons is that men and women have a lot of conflict, different aspects, of political, the sort of tie-in between masculinity and politics and so on. And I think the idea of actually having honest, open conversations is important. And that's sort of what I felt the film was about. And because men have a lot of say in the world, I think it's important to take a good hard look at ourselves and to have these conversations.
Yeah, and I tell you what, so five countries, continents, to do the research and speak with the experts that you have. I mean, you've got experts such as Dr. Judy Chu, Ashanti Branch, happen to have been on the show so far, talking about very similar topics. We've got Terry Real. We've got Carol Gilligan. I mean, we've got people that have been in the arena around these topics for a very, very, very long time who who give their accounts, give their experience, share their research. So it's very informative, but it also, I love your ability to tell a story and paint a picture. I do feel like it was a good job at really giving a bird's eye view of what's going on, because something I'm very challenged by is when people create things to almost contribute to confirmation biases with people out there.
Yeah.
Like just to tell people what they want to hear versus have these difficult conversations. And so I'm curious, has there been any pushback with putting this film together outside of course, pandemic and COVID and things like that? Has there been any pushback from audiences, from experts that you've worked with or tried to reach out to for a project like this?
No, actually, surprisingly not. We've had a very, very strong reaction to the film. Every screening that we've had has sold out, or even beyond sold out. And the discussions that went on afterwards were always, had to be cut off because we could only reach a certain point. We haven't had any controversial, anyone coming up with objections and I think that's possibly because the film, the people in the film, as you said, this is not a new conversation, about masculinity. And this is, all the people in the film have been working for a long time on this subject. But what's new is the fact that it's in the public arena. And I think it's time, it's the right time to have this conversation. So I think we're all caught up in this conversation as opposed to, I don't think the film is creating any big holes that people can fall down. It's
fantastic. And I tell you, I want to ask this before we go any further. You've done a lot of work around empathy and connection in your past, and so I want to ask you, how does that work relate to this new path with the Future Is Humane?
That's a very good question. The last two films that we made in this series, there was empathy, and there was one on fairness. And I think you can see that comes into play when you have privilege and power. So masculinity is about, the first step to break away the walls of masculinity and the borders is to actually understand you have power and privilege and to then take a different perspective. And one of the difficulties men have, I'm part of that too, is that we have power and privilege without actually knowing we have power and privilege. We don't see it because we have it. And so when you have it and you don't see it, that means you don't actually see another perspective very easily, because you're sort of blind to someone not having it because everyone has it. And so, so I think to deal with empathy and to deal with fairness is part of the way we have to deal with masculinity. We have to have the ability to first understand other perspectives and then apply what we have naturally, which is a sort of sense of fairness. And then we'll see very clearly that we should be inclusive of all humans, and we should see ourselves as very similar to others, whether they're men or women or rich or poor and so on. So for me, the whole thing comes together because of that.
Why do you feel that so many men feel like that as these conversations are coming up around these days, gender, we're talking about, men's rights, women's rights, we're getting a lot of energy thrown around right now. Why do you believe so many men feel like it is a persecution of men and manhood, when it's really, from what I see, just a conversation around masculinity, which I think there needs to be a clear definition that masculinity isn't manhood, isn't man. Masculinity are characteristics, right? That aren't just for men. Right.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And the miscommunication is about the subject matter. And I think for people who would like to talk about masculinity and point fingers and say this is wrong and this, you should be doing this and why are we doing it, I think it's very counterproductive, because you have structural problems which we, as men, we inherit, and then you have emotional problems which as men we struggle with. We deal with our like women, we all have And so the two things are separate. What you cannot lump it all together and just say manhood is a bad thing, masculinity is a bad thing, toxic. Everyone has to change this and change that. It's not productive. What is productive is to see the two things as separate, to see the structural problem as what it is, and then come together on the emotional stuff, come together on communication, get the communication working so conversations can be had in a positive way to deal with the structure, so that we're not, because I think it's very true. If people are finger wagging and saying men should be doing this, and why don't they sort themselves out, and why are they doing it, then you get a defensive attitude, and so men feel persecuted.
Yeah,
and so I think
like they're on the back foot.
Like they're on the back foot, exactly. So I think it's important to understand that even men, well, especially men, we have to grow emotionally. We have to deal with. This is in the film. You have to deal with certain traumas. You have to deal with things from your childhood, or you have to deal with how you feel about yourself, self-esteem, and all these things about expectations of society. And that's all going on while you're in this position of power, which you're not really aware of, while you're defending your position, which you shouldn't need to defend. You should just work with conversations to resolve the structural problems.
Almost to suggest that this isn't a battleground. It's not a ring where we're ringing the bell and throwing leather. It's just a place to have a conversation. I think there's a real challenge for me. I can't speak for every man, but I see there being a real challenge for a lot of people to confront the topic, especially if in my existence, since being born, in my entire existence in life, now these conversations are popping up. I've come from a pretty culturally diverse place. I've traveled all over the world. I've been exposed to difference. And I still sometimes am challenged by when things like male privilege, white privilege, these statements are thrown around just because of it's a new thing. It feels like a new thing. Like you're saying, it's like, well, say it's there. The awareness can feel very new. Now think about a more insular community. Think about men and women and non-binary people that haven't been exposed to these kinds of conversations. To me, it sounds like we can't be, like you've suggested, we can't be shoving this down people's throats. We can't be asking them to change on a dime. We can't be asking them to. I guess what I'm trying to say is there's got to be a way that we can at least softly open up the conversation for them, for people to be open to these new ideas. Let's just say, I don't know if I'm saying the right thing. I'm tongue twisted. No. Clearly, this is confusing for me, and I get to sit in this seat and talk about masculinity and manhood all the time. It's challenging.
But I think what you're saying is absolutely right. You've got two conversations in one. That's what I was trying to say before. So you've got the structural, which is, what's there. If you're in a small community, it's been there for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. So who does what and where the definitions and the borders are. And then you've got the interior world of each person. And I think this is where the conversation happens, is on the interior world, where you actually begin to understand the other person rather than play the role and say, this is the border, this is our cultural border, this is how we do it. Instead, you understand what that means for the other person. And then through that, you can understand someone else's perspective. Once you understand someone's perspective, you have like an aha moment where you go, okay, I can see where this is a conflict. I can see why this is uncomfortable for you. And that's when structural change can happen, because you as the man, say, or as the person, let's say, who is privileged, can make that change. So I think it's about not taking the political personally and actually dealing with the personal to change the political or the structural. Do you see what I mean? It's a confusion of two.
It's a multi-directional approach, it sounds like, where you're not just trying to hit their heads, you're trying to hit their hearts as well. And they're and so rather than saying all white men are the problem, we're talking on an individual level as well. Because I think that's where a lot of people find adversity to these kinds of conversations. Because like when we had Tony Porter on, he was talking about, you may not be a man that would ever mentally, emotionally, sexually, physically consciously want to harm someone else or harm a woman, but how do we allow it to happen, right, inside the current structure, societal structure? Because then we have a lot of people, I think, on wherever they stand on whatever issue, that take a lot of offense that when a whole group of people is lumped together and painted with this broad thing. It's like people saying that anyone who voted on the left wants to cancel everyone and anyone who voted on the right is a racist. It's such an irrational statement and thing to say. Yet there is so much belief around that. There's so much energy around these binaries that we set up to try and describe one another. But the challenge here is to remove those and have a conversation with the human being who I may have a disagreement with.
Yeah.
Easier said, easier hypothesized than done.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's easier said than done.
Yeah.
But I think that's the bottom line, is that if you put two people who are politically different or have different attitudes toward gender, and you sit them next to each other for an hour and they have to have dinner next to each other, you'll find that they'll suddenly realize that they have a lot more in common, and that some of the misunderstandings and some of the truths that they thought were truths aren't quite as true in every case, and so on. So I think what the film tries to do is to give a sort of inner portrait of different men in different situations, which opens conversations about yourself or about someone you know or so on. So it ultimately comes back to the individual, whether it's you or someone you know, and that allows you to be more honest and to be more, forget all the structural and the politics. How do you feel? How do you deal with the world? What do you really think about a man box? And where would you like to see yourself in this spectrum and so on? So
I like that. I love the question, where is this true for you? So that it isn't, you're male, you're white, you've had a yellow brick road your whole life. It's to remove that blanket statement and say, hey, where is this true for you?
Yeah.
In a previous episode, when we spoke about the man box, in one of the introductions, I speak to, we were a bunch of guys in high school sitting around a phone, looking at photos of girls at our sister school and calling them all sorts of things.
Yeah.
And did I speak up against it? No, I joined in because that's how I felt safe inside the man box. How I felt safe there. Am I going to carry that shame with me for the rest of my life? No way. But I can use it as a stepping stone to better understand my role as a man and how I can be a champion.
Yeah. And absolutely.
And I still mess up. There's still opportunities where I should speak up and I don't, for whatever reason. And I think if we can have the grace to allow every guy, gal, non-binary pal, just have the grace to say, hey, this is going to be a messy process. It's not going to be linear. Let's just keep having these conversations and not shy away from the tough stuff and stop pointing fingers and instead start joining hands, because we're all human, right?
Yeah. And think of the growth. Think of the personal growth that happens when all that, openness comes out, I mean, it's going places. Otherwise we're stuck on the, I'm in Berlin at the minute, but if you're on a bicycle and you get stuck in one of the tram lines, I mean, that's it. That's where you're going. You can't get out. So, it's about being open and growing as a person. And that includes understanding who you are and what the system has created for you, and stretching out of the man box, out of the narrow lines, to someone who's not like you or to someone who doesn't think like you. And then you may see yourself in a different light, which is where the growth is.
Thank you for saying that. Thank you for saying that. Since launching this a month ago, we've been getting a lot of feedback from people that are upset that we've invited certain guests on or having certain conversations around certain things. And, a big part of my mission for this and my whole team here agree is that if we're not asking a question on behalf of the people who disagree with us, then then really we're just preaching to the choir. We're really just taking care of a very small population of people. Whereas if we can really just open it up more, open up that conversation a bit more to include more people, I think then we'll start to achieve really what it is that I judge majority of the world wants, right? Interconnectedness, to get back to that place of connection. And I love at the end of the film, and I'm not going to spoil or give anything away, this theme around connection, just getting back to connection, this thing that we're born with these sensitivities as little boys. And somewhere along the line, those things generally get trained out of us. And by getting back to that is how we can get back to connection and relation. And these conversations I see as a means to do that. Alex, I want to ask you, I'm very curious, man. You did a lot of travel for this project. I mean, you went to Israel, Palestine, America, Berlin. I want to know, did you notice what were the differences that you saw culturally around the different cultures' understandings of manhood? Like, was there anything that really stood out to you from different cultures?
Well, I think in the film, I mean, you can see that in the film, is like Japan is for sure a very extreme version, because it's in Japan, the idea of hierarchy is for men, having any person talk to you, men need to talk like this, and anyone that talks to you like this means very shameful for you. So the concept of shame in Japan was incredibly strong. I think that was one highlight. Germany, I think there was a lot of anger. There was an anger workshop that we filmed, and I think that was quite, there's a lot of repression. Sorry, that's terribly judgmental, but keeping things back, not saying what you absolutely think.
Oh yeah.
About your emotions necessarily. So I think each nation has a particular sort of way of dealing with emotions and how they see things that are shameful or not shameful. So yeah, Germany, Japan, America, much more open. The therapy sessions that we filmed, men opened up and so on very much. So I think one of the things that came out when we screened the film was someone said and it was a woman actually, and she said, it was so, what really amazed her was the fact that men opened up on camera like this and talked about their inner selves openly. And there's a man standing there with a camera. And she said, I can't believe that they were okay with that. The point is, for what she said, is that what it really leads me to think is that men really would like a platform to talk. Men would really like to talk about their inner feelings. So I think for all the nationalities, whether you have this wall because you're Japanese, or you have this wall because you're German, or you have more openness, all men, I think, would like to be in the conversation and to actually express themselves much more. So I think that was a sort of thing that was a common theme, was to what degree are you willing to talk and how much do you want to talk? And I think generally there is a very strong need to talk.
Yeah. There's as we hopefully move away from these older models of rugged individualism, that men are islands, they have to sort everything out on their own. And I've seen those men countless times join my men's circle, other men's groups, do a new warrior training through the Mankind Project, and then they can't shut up. Because it's just this euphoric feeling of feeling like, oh my gosh, I finally have a place where I can feel heard, feel seen, that it doesn't matter that I drive this car or have this much money to my name or these letters after my name, that it's not about status anymore. It's about actually how in touch am I with myself, the man in the mirror, not the possessions I have.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's one of the reasons why this sort of the Future Is Humane Project, we're trying very hard. This is the first time we do it, but to have the films work as conversation starters with, hosting screenings and talking afterwards, because this idea to actually release, to have people talk about how they feel about issues and things, which are hugely important, how we connect with each other, how we sort of function collectively or individually is affected by that.
Yeah, absolutely. Just quickly, for those listening live and those that are listening on the podcast, it is the 29th of March, 2021, and there are 2 screenings coming up. One being on Thursday, April 15th, 2021. We have links in the show notes as well as on the live video to register for that. And March 6th, I believe, is the other one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. If by the time this podcast is released, we'll try and make sure that those details are there for those that might not be able to make the 15th. But I love that it isn't just a screening. You have Ashanti Branch come on and you guys are talking about the difficulty of taking off the masculinity mask. So it's not just a movie, it's actually a chance to have conversations with people that are in the film itself. So very, very, what are you most excited about from these screenings?
Well, I think what will be interesting is that we're doing a system where people can actually talk to each other. So it's going to be on Zoom, and people will, Flavia, who's running this, is going to set it up in such a way that it's not just Ashanti or whoever is on the panel talking. It's going to be a chance to watch the film, hear a little bit, and then begin to talk amongst yourselves almost, and then come back and talk together. So it's actually a real conversation. It'll be, I think I'm extremely curious to see how this works, to have, if there's 500 people watching this, how, what is going to come out of this. So I think it could be a really, really interesting first screening.
Fantastic. Well, and for those listening, I may have misspoke. I think I said March 6th. I meant May. May 6th. But I love the idea of this being an inclusive experience, not just a screening of a film, not just having a great man like Ashanti come on, but actually, get a chance to speak up and share. I think that's really cool. Really cool. And I'm excited for it myself. What's your hope for this film? I mean, if you could just wave a magic wand and this film was to have every impact you believe it's capable of having, what would that be?
I think the most important thing, if this film could make men understand that they have something inside them to resolve, to sort out, to think about, to express, and for women to understand that men are going through incredible internal turmoil that is not something that they were, the patriarchal system has dealt everyone a bad hand. And so it's not, yes, men, so I think it's about coming together and saying the system sucks a bit. We need to have a system whereby you're a human, and that's it. You're a human, I'm a human. And so the idea is to break down these borders and barriers between us. And that isn't just about gender. It can be about race. It can be about class. It can be about education levels. It can be about everything. It's about growth. So for me, if the film, like the other 2 films, could start these conversations, and if these conversations are being had anyway. It's not like the film was started. But if I could wave a magic wand, it would be about waking up to the fact that actually these are completely arbitrary divisions. There's no need, or certainly not to the extent we have. They're very rigid. And we're talking about where we are. The world is a huge place. I've worked in small villages where, men are sitting on a wall with a radio, listening away while their wife is wandering off to go pick up water. Then she's coming back and feeding the goats, and then she's going off somewhere else, and he's still sitting on the wall listening to the radio and talking politics. So I think it's really there's absolutely no need for these ridiculous divisions. It's very unfair.
Beautiful, mate. Well, how can we find out more about this? These films that you're producing right now. Obviously, we're going to have information for the screenings, but tell us about the Future Is Humane.
So the Future Is Humane Project, we've just launched our website at thefutureishumane.com, and basically there it's project to do what we've just talked about, which is to try and show that being human is simple, and that being humane demands more. So that little extra E on the end of human sort of says a lot. It's got to do with empathy. It's got to do with equality. It's got to do with engagement. And the idea of the Future Is Humane is to, as a project, it's just starting now. We have 4 films in the series which have been made already, including this new one. And the idea of taking it forward is to work on new ideas to encourage young filmmakers to join us, and to maybe commission films, to make maybe to work with young people with cameras, to try and basically get some of these ideas, because there are many films that could be made as discussion points. And what we would like to do is facilitate the discussion as filmmakers, as hosting discussions,
storytellers,
like this, storytellers. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that's the future, hopefully.
Yeah. Fantastic, Alex. And a question directed at you.
Mm-hmm.
Where's your growth work in all of this? How have you had to stretch personally to kind of have these conversations and be with your hands and feet in the mud on this stuff?
I think when you go and film with a camera to people, you meet people who are absolutely up to their necks in this. They've been studying the subject. They've been working like Ashanti. How many hours has he put in with young people? I haven't put in any hours with young people. He's put in hours and hours and hours and hours. So there I come with a camera. But when I talk to him for a second, or for half a day, whatever it is, I suddenly, it's like someone pouring it all into me. I kind of sort of go, oh my God, I didn't realize that. That is so amazing. Like you've interviewed him. So each time you meet these people, it's actually enriches you, and it's a very direct link, because they've got so much wealth of knowledge, of experience, that it does affect you. I don't think it's like studying. I think when you're making a film, it's a very experiential learning curve. So I don't know if it's changed me. I hope so, but I think it's made me understand a little bit more.
Beautiful. Well, Alex, thank you so much for taking the time to be here, mate, to share your experiences, as well as tell us about this film for myself personally and the audience here. And for those that have been watching live and those that are just listening via the podcast, thank you so much for your comments, for your feedback, for your attention, for your giveaway, for your contribution to these topics and conversations. It really does mean the world. But more than anything, remember the impact that every single one of you, of us, has with this information, what is possible with this information. And so thank you guys again for an incredible month, first month of this podcast. We really appreciate all of your attention. Alex, thank you. And guys, we will see you again very soon for another recording of the Mankind Podcast, the show where we break the molds of modern manhood to prove that there is more than just one way to be a man. See you soon, guys. Lots of love. Just before you go, we have a quick audio clip here, which is the trailer for Alex's film, Beyond Men and Masculinity. If you want to register for a live screening on the upcoming dates of April 15th and May 6th, you can find those links in the show notes. Enjoy.
Being a boy comes with a certain set of rules. How do you be one of the boys?
Crying was very looked down upon.
And your father was the
My
man.
father was front and center with that, yes.
They have all these feelings, and there's nowhere for these feelings to go. They know it's considered a feminine weakness.
Boys work very, very hard to achieve a masculine identity. But that identity can be taken from them.
Patriarchy is a deviously clever system.
Men learn to escape by moving from shame to grandiosity. We teach them to disconnect from their feelings. We teach them to disconnect from vulnerability.
Vulnerability is a missing link that men need to be truly powerful.
To be a man means to be in a superior position. So any move toward democracy, which is toward equality, becomes a threat to manhood. And if manhood is threatened, violence is imminent. There's a puzzle that we have to figure out.
What's happening right now is an opportunity for men to be human.
To be completely trusted and vulnerable and not be judged is what helps me to becoming this new human being.
Kindness and caring and loving, and how about those be the alpha traits?
We're trying to figure out how to be fully ourselves and fully connected at the same time. It's the only thing that will really make us happy.
We're really disrupting some core foundational elements upon which our society is built, and that feels dangerous.
This has been the Mankind Podcast, produced in association with the Mankind Project USA. I have been your host, Brandon Clift, and I personally want to thank our guests for joining us today and imparting their wisdom from their experiences in this amazing journey called life. And of course, I want to thank you, the listener, because through your attention and your support, you make it a heck of a lot easier for us to let men out there in the world know that they are not alone and that there is more than one way to be a man. Special thanks, of course, goes to my incredible team, Marketing and Communications Director Boyson Hodgson, producer and editor of this episode, Michael Russo, who makes me sound so much more intelligent than I actually am, so of course, special kudos goes there. And if you've been enjoying the music throughout this episode and all of our episodes, check out Jim, Donovan, and the Sun King Warriors. I have links to them in the show notes. Now, the fee for this episode is simple. If you found gold and insights that you believe could benefit your loved ones and those you care about, be sure to share it with them. And of course, remember that life doesn't happen to us, it happens for us, so long as we rip the pen out of fate's hand and become the author of our own story. So my friend, pick up the pen and we'll see you next week. Lots of love.